Hey y'all. So today we are against Dash, and let's get right into it. Lots of things to talk about this matchup. This matchup is actually really interesting and actually quite difficult. So, alright, we won the Daryl and chose to go first. Didn't manage to find a chill or anything to set up. We found two reds and Channel Lake Frigid and an ice card. So I just go ahead and set up the Channel Lake Frigid. It's basically like a free, free to do turn 0. We had no red that was worth casting. I'd rather save the CNC for my following turn. So this matchup is quite tempo-y. It's actually really difficult. So dashes nowadays they shouldn't be doing they shouldn't be popping up Talishar and Teklo Pounder into you, because then you can just fatigue them. At the same time, they're not gonna go full items on you. They're sort of gonna, this is gonna start an induction chamber like my opponent has here, to like guard them against fatigue and then just try and like be aggressive with boost and stuff. So this matchup, and also Dash has like enough blues and AB3 to like, block you properly. So I find this matchup to be quite similar to the Guardian matchup, but worse. Because while Guardian like struggles to like make use of a 5-card hand, Dash doesn't quite. Like Dash can use a 5-card hand if you give it to them. But if you don't, they're still good on like smaller hands as well. So that's what makes this matchup really awkward. Because they put out the damage that you have to deal with if you give them too many cards, and if you don't, you aren't leaking damage. You aren't leaking damage because they have AB3 and enough blues. So anyway, so my opponent chose not to Arsenal on their turn, so I decided to just play out the Frostex. Again, the thing is, at this point, I wasn't entirely sure what game plan my Dash opponent was on. I saw the second induction chamber, and that made me think they might be on like an item plan, like they want to go out full pistols against me. And so I was like, if they want to do that, I need to set up my Frostexes to sort of combat that, right? Because if they have a massive board state and I have like no Frostexes, then I'll just lose. So I go and play out the Frostex. Anyway, they didn't have an arsenal, so it's not like the CNC was threatening much. So I go and do that, and we drop into 3 reds. Normally, the red I like to play the most would be the Ice Vein, but we didn't draw an ice card to fuse with, firstly, and second, we already have a red in arsenal, so there's no point playing the Ice Vein. It'll just be like 5 Arcane. So I'm actually going to be blocking with it this turn, or maybe sinking it to the bottom. And then if my opponent Arsenal, I'll send a CNC at them, and if they don't, I'll send the Fighting Spirit at them. Yeah, it's always painful blocking with an Ice Vein, though, I have to say. Just because it is, like, one of our most powerful cards. Alright, the first 2 T-Bones, I mean, we can just put, like, Striders and, like, Gauntlet in front of it, and we don't lose anything. If their last card's another T-Bone, then we have to give up, like, either Tunic or Peak, which would be annoying. Ah, yes. Okay, yeah. So at this point, I made the read that my opponent is going to Arsenal. There we go. Yeah, so then I was like, I'm going to send a CNC at them, and then I want to put this D-React in Arsenal. The alternative was I use the D-React on the T-Bone, and send CNC on this turn and Arsenal Fighting Spirit. I think that would have been a viable option as well. What felt bad to me was basically I'm losing out 1 block on the sink below, obviously, if I use it on T-Bone. Whereas Fighting Spirit kind of effectively blocks 3 because it gains me a life, so I don't lose any value there. Of course, there's a lot to be said about having a red threat in Arsenal. So yeah, that could have been the play, but I chose to send a CNC, and my opponent just takes it and hits the maximum velocity, so that's really nice. So then at this point, I'm sort of getting mixed signals. The fact that my opponent just took that kind of makes me think they aren't on like a full item plan. And they just, had the extra chamber, so that's why they played it. Also seeing the maximum velocity and stuff, so I'm like, okay, they probably are trying to boost aggressively and then just have these induction chambers for the late game, when the deck just has blues remaining. Yeah, so we start with Throttle, and Hypothermia is like one of like the biggest power card into Dash. Because they don't have a single source of natural go again, so Hypothermia always stops their turn. So that's a card I definitely want to keep. I obviously want to send an E-Strike on my turn. Yeah, that's the other thing about like having a red in Arsenal. Like if I had a Fighting Spirit in Arsenal, it could get really awkward where it's like, I already have a red in hand that I want to play, and then I have a red in Arsenal, and it's hard to like cycle them out. So I'm glad I put the D-React there. But then my opponent just plays a Purifier, so it's pretty... It is very confusing. My opponent's like boosting a little and setting up an item. Well, not confusing. I mean, yeah, it is confusing in terms of I don't know what game plan they're on. But it's also like very effective for them, so you know it's kind of sad for me. Anyway, so Hypothermia is a huge power card, so that's something I definitely want to keep. And this hand, like the best thing I can do is just E-Strike go again and then Coronet Peak. So that is what we're gonna do. Oh yeah, and the sync that I did on my opponent's turn, I sank away the Frost Axe because, like, just based on like my opponent like boosting like those T-bones and the throttle, I thought they are probably going to be more aggressive. So let me just, I don't want to set up the Frost Axe. Like I don't think I can afford to set up the Frost Axe, but I do want to keep it in the deck just in case for the late game. So there's a choice behind that, and here we have the pretty telegraphed E-Strike into Coronet Peak. So I'm actually secretly hoping my opponent just like takes this and tries to be aggressive on their turn, because then I can blow them out with Hypothermia. So yeah, they do. They took the 5 and we forced one card out of them. And then, you know, where we can still stop the rest of the 4-card hand with a Hypothermia if they play into it. Okay, and then we draw this hand, which is it's a really bad hand, because it's all blues. So really, what I want to do is just Coronet Peak on my turn and Arsenal is Channel Lake Frigid. But 2 of my blues don't block, so I have a really, really difficult decision here. Cool, so let's go ahead and block 2 here, and my plan is to Blizzard on Resolution Step. And if my opponent pays for it, well, I can... Like, I basically know if I just double Blizzard this, there's no way my opponent pays for it. And then I can Coronet Peak with the Channel Lake Frigid and just keep the Hypothermia in Arsenal. Is sort of what I'm thinking about. Although, yeah, so when I have Hypothermia in Arsenal, I'm really hoping I have a red to, like, send back on my opponent, because... How do I say it? Like, Coronet Peaking... Like, using Coronet Peak when I have Hypothermia in Arsenal is a little redundant, because it's not like my opponent gets to use the extra card anyway, since I'm going to Hypothermia to end the turn. I guess Dash is a bit of an exception, because they can like pitch load up the items first before doing something that can get blown up by Hypothermia. But still, like the extra card usually doesn't matter if I'm going to Hypothermia them. So it's a bit of a pity that we didn't find a red. Anyway, but our opponent doesn't pay for the Blizzard, so we still, you know, got a lot of value there. Like our opponent just passing with 2 cards left in hand and a card in Arsenal. However, again, like we don't have a red to send back, so my turn's actually quite difficult. I could just Coronet Peak to keep the Channel Lake Frigid in my hand, which is a good power card. But I end up opting to just play it out right now, since I still have the Hypothermia as like a good blow you out sort of card. But Channel Lake Frigid like is still gonna like affect my opponent's turn here quite a bit, so I'm hoping I can just keep the Hypothermia in Arsenal for another turn, while this Channel Lake Frigid is the one that's going to slow my opponent down for now. Although unfortunately, yeah, again, we don't draw into like a decent red. But we draw into a second, well, this is our third Frost Axe. So, and since I have a channel down, and I have a Hypothermia in Arsenal, I can sort of play this Frost Axe for free. And hopefully the 2 Frost Axes like gain me enough value over the rest of the game to be like effective to like if I drew a red this turn. Because I mean the whole like just keep blocking out against Dash is not gonna work, especially now that they have 2 chambers and a purifier. Like I'm not gonna win the fatigue game. I'm not gonna win the late game either unless I like start putting on a lot more pressure now, or setting up my own sort of endgame. So we sync, and I do sync away an Ice Eternal. Firstly, just to keep Ice Eternal in my deck in case we do end up in a late game scenario with Frost Axes. And also to try and dig into another red. Okay, then my opponent tries to pop their boots to play Tomb of Fandal, but I think they forgot Channel Lake Frigid was on the field. I feel like this happens on Talishar a bunch. It's like, it's a bit hard to see board states. So they realized they couldn't pay for it, I think. And they undid, or did they still go through with it? Oh no, they still went, yeah, no, they still went through with it. Okay, yeah, so they went through with it, and then they Yeah, they did the tournament final. I'm not sure I agree with them. I mean, popping the third point of AB is really, really big in this matchup. And also when you're doing it on a Channel Link Frigid turn, it's quite, you know, like how much can you how much of those extra cards actually gonna get you? The other thing about syncing away the Ice Eternal was I was hoping I'll draw into a second Ice card, in which case I can play Frost Hex and like Waning Moon to have two Ice cards in my pitch zone to keep the channel around for another turn. Unfortunately, we don't. We draw into another D-React. But, we can, since our opponent's attacking us further, I do get value out of it. I just play it here and I can still play Frost Hex on my turn. Still keep Hypothermia to blow my opponent out. Effectively making my Frost Hex like free in a sort of like in the tempo sort of sense. Excuse me. Oh, okay. Okay. Never mind. My opponent chose not to attack. Instead, they set up a second item. Oh, sorry, a third item. So now they have two Purifiers and two Chambers, so this is getting really, really scary. We do have two Frost Hexes, but it's not... That's not as scary as the items they have. Right, I mispitched. I wanted to pitch the red with this Frost Hex. Just because when I have a Hypothermia in Arsenal, I don't think I need the D-React. I don't need to hold on to it since I already have a way to end my opponent's turn. And I'd rather dig into an offensive red. So we find a red Ice Vein, which is awesome. But this hand, again, is... Right, so Hypothermia is a power card into Dash. So drawing three of them in the same hand is very, very bad. Especially alongside with the Blizzard as well. So it's just... It's pretty unfortunate that we drew it this way. But alright, so honestly, this is like one of my nightmares like against Dromai. Because, against Dromai, we have the Poppers, we have the Channeling Fridges, and the Hypothermias, which, like, really blow them out. Similar with Dash, Hypothermias and Channeling Fridges blow them out. But when you draw too many of them, like, very early on, too close together, then that really severely limits the number of times you can actually stop them. Because you'll be forced, like, pitch a block with some of them instead of actually using them, and that's really sad. Okay, so my opponent actually just loaded up the items and just played another Purifier. Which is honestly another thing that it was quite sort of good for my opponent that they boosted so much in the early game but didn't boost like any item. Just the fact that they still found 3 Purifiers and 2 Chambers, also pretty early on, and didn't boost any of them away. Definitely quite fortunate for them. And yeah, so my opponent basically just let me have a full 5-card hand, but that's the other drawback of having, like, keeping Hypothermia in my arsenal. It's not something I just want to throw out to try and Waning Moon them to make use of my 5-card hand. So, pretty sad there. That I can't actually use 5 cards, I only use 3 out of my 5 cards. Right, so the thing about my opponent only having AB2 is that they actually couldn't block my Waning Moon for 2 there. I mean, they had 1 float. They blocked 2 on the Ice Vein, and they had 1 floating. But my Waning Moon was coming in for 2, and if they want to block it, then you pitch, they can't use that 1 floating to block 1 of it, because they only have AB2. So that's pretty good for us. Okay, so our opponent is, yeah, they put a Steam Counter and Purifier, and I imagine they're going to start, like, activating them. So I'm pretty glad out of this Hypothermia. So we have a really nice play of play Hypothermia and my opponent's turn, send a red hail at them, and arsenal my other Hypothermia. So you might think that waiting till resolution for the pistol shot isn't very, like, is not particularly useful, because normally, like, you wait till resolution step is to play around, like, an attack red, like a pummel or lightning press or something. Their opponent, may want to hold until, like, the last attack in a chain link. So when you do a resolution step, they're past the attack reaction step, but they also, so they can't use the attack react they're holding on to, but they also don't get to attack again. In this case, against dash, the reason you want to do that is because my opponent wasted a steam counter on the induction chamber. You know, in the attack rack step, they give it go again, but then by the time resolution came, the hypothermia, you know, stopped the go again from the pistol. Whereas if I did the hypothermia earlier, they just wouldn't have attack reacted. They wouldn't have used the steam counter. So a very minor thing, we just get one steam counter off of them, which is like worth one resource. But, you know, especially in a game like this, that sort of stuff definitely does add up. Okay, so opponent blocked 4 total. Blocked 2 on our Aether Hail and then 2 more on Waiting Wound, which is actually really sad because I have another hypothermia. So I'm really hoping they want to just take the damage and I can blow them out with a hypothermia. But they don't. Instead, they give me 2 cards, in which case I'm kind of incentivized to just not hypothermia. So, and especially since I drew, like, you know, I want to hypothermia them when I'm gonna get, like, you know, 2 more, like, two cards worth of stuff from them. Whereas in this case, if I hypothermia, I'm sort of only getting, like, 1 card, the 1 card in hand. So, and plus, I'm able to block out their turn here anyway, so I just choose to hold on to this hypothermia. Yep, and my opponent's just loading up the items. Okay, and then they attack with a pistol. And remember, my opponent has down to just AB2, so my blue Ice Vein is actually alive. So I could just have taken 2 here, send the Ice Vein and fuse it, and then Waning Moon. Which potentially could have been the correct play. Instead, I choose to block, because I have Tunic up. So instead of sending the Ice Vein fused and then mooning, I decided I'm just going to block here, and then send this Ice Bolt and use Tunic to Waning Moon for 2. So I'm still threatening 5 damage, but I also saved 2 life from by blocking the pistol. Although it could be said that, you know, I would have taxed my opponent another card or another 2 resources by playing the blue Ice Vein instead. So I think it balances out total, but I do get to use my Tunic counter, which has just been sitting there. Okay, so my opponent's blocking, and I'm definitely sad to see my opponent blocking when I'm holding on to his hypothermia. It could be that they're feeling threatened from the 2 Frost Axes, and so they want to try and conserve their life. And I mean, the thing is, they have like 3 Purifiers and 2 Chambers, so really they're making the correct play here by trying to block me out, because they have a much scarier late game than I do with the items. Okay, so we draw into Chill, and that's so there's a bit of a decision point about whether I want to set up this Chill, and I make the call that I don't think I want to. Firstly, I've already used 2 red Ice Veins, and Brain Freezes are not so effective in this matchup. Also, I just don't think this matchup is gonna go that long. I don't think I'm incentivized to have this matchup go long, is the thing. Also, I do have an Amulet of Ice as like a pseudo, like just, you know, smaller effect of the Chill, which my opponent already at 20, I feel like should be good enough. Okay, and then my opponent pitches a red to fire off this pistol. And given that they blocked the previous turn with a blue and a red, I'm hedging that they don't have much in terms of resources. Yep, and then we just go ahead and block with a Chill. Yeah, I made the call right here that I don't think I'm setting up the Chill. And in any case, that's the first Chill we've seen. So if I need to, I can still set up one later. Whereas right now I have the good play of, you know, just playing CNC. Okay, and then my opponent plays a Techlocore. So honestly, I'm quite happy about that, because I've still been holding on to the hypothermia. So, you know, they have the Techlocore, so now the hypothermia sort of blows that out as well. They might have all these extra resources, but their turn just ends. Okay, so we get to play Amulet of Ice into CNC since our opponent, you know, just played an item. And yeah, here's where we're just going to see the Dash's armor, because, you know, against Iyslander, you kind of want to use your armor like when you can, since, you know, you don't know when it's going to be a physical attack or an arcane damage attack, so you might as well use it on like the early few physical attacks that you see. Okay, and then we draw into a handful of 2 blocks, which is a little unfortunate. Okay, oh yeah, and this is the scariest part. Opponent starts with the high octane, which is kind of the only answer Dash has to hypothermia. Because now every time they boost, they still get an action point, like just from the high octane, not from the not from the boost getting go again. So that combined with our opponent, playing this this attack with an on hit is makes the situation kind of rough. So I mean, blocking 4 on this is effectively blocking 7. So I really want to block this. I'm also still just gonna play the hypothermia, just to force my opponent to boost more if they want to attack me more. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to threaten more damage. So I actually make the call here that I'm going to give up my Carnet Peak. I make the call here that I'm not going to win this game if I spend my turns using Carnet Peak, because in the long game, my Dash opponent is going to win with the item setup that they have. So I realize that if I'm forced into turns where I'm using Carnet Peak, I'm going to lose anyway. So I want to be using reds on my turn, like using my cards offensively. And so I'm okay giving up this Carnet Peak right here. So, of course, there is the argument that I can block with a 2-block, block with Ironhide, pitching a blue floating 2, and then also play Hypothermia, and then I have 2 floating to Waning Moon for 3. But the thing about doing Hypothermia is that it sort of ends my opponent's turn, or, causes them to do a lot less than what they wanted to. And so the 3 damage from Waning Moon is mostly just going to get blocked anyway, and I've used a whole extra card, which means if I want to send this Fighting Spirit on my turn, I actually won't have an arsenal. So I choose to give up Carnet Peak instead of doing the Ironhide Gauntlet line. Okay, so my opponent just loads the items and then plays the Techlocore. So honestly, not a strong high octane turn from them anyway. Although I think it was because of the Hypothermia. They did have another boost card that they pitched. Cool, and then we just send 7 at them. Which, it's a nice big number. You want to keep doing that. And we get to Arsenal Polar Blast, which is the good offensive Arsenal versus Arsenal against it is chill. Cool, and our opponents like Techlocars pop, so that's, they're going to have like 4 free resources this turn, which is pretty big. But given that we can respond to Techlocar, I decide to play the Polar Blast now and also hit them with the Waning Moon now before they get those excess resources. Which means that if they want to block the Waning Moon, they're going to give me a card from their hand. Otherwise, they're just eating 3. And it's likely that they can't use like all their Techlocar resources. I take that back. It's Dash. They can always use all their resources. But I'm sort of forcing them to like eat 3 damage now, and because they don't want to, they probably don't want to use the card from their hand when they're going to get 4 resources. So, yep, they took the whole 3, which is nice. But we are about to start eating a whole bunch of damage because our opponent has like all the resources they need and all the items already loaded up. Also, in terms of like our power cards remaining to stop our opponent's onslaught, we've already seen all 3 Hypothermias, we've seen 2 Channel Lake Frigids, there's really only 1 Channel Lake Frigid left. So unless I see it soon, it's actually not gonna, it's not gonna save us. So that was the other thing I was considering when I was deciding to block with Carnet Peak. I just don't have enough ways to stall my opponent out, and I just need to rely on like being offensive to be able to win this game. Yep, pistol's coming for 5. We just decide to take the first one, just in case our opponent's holding on to some like on hit in their hand that we might need to care about. I can't think of what it would be, because even Combustible Courier is not on hit we need to care about if our opponent only has like 2 cards remaining. So, but we might as well just hold on, just don't give our opponent information yet, since we're only blocking 1 card anyway. And I will be having Tunic up, so I'll be arseling the Ice Bolt to threaten 6 damage. Ice Bolt plus Moon. Although, if I can do the Ice Bolt late enough with the Frostbite sticks, as an extra 2 damage from the Frost X's. Cool, so we block the second pistol hit, in case our opponent just decides to like load up the items. And like pass. Which sometimes dashes do, although I think having activated 3 purifiers, they shouldn't. They should load up the items and then just fire the pistol. Which is, I think, what they do. Okay, yeah, so they load up some items and they fire the pistol and they're going to arsenal the last card. So just like that, we had like, a pretty decent life lead, and just like that, we just lost it. Because, I mean, part of the reason why we had the life lead was that our opponent was, setting up items. And now, they're finally getting their payoff. And I have to say, at this point, this is one of the drawbacks of running all these attacks, like the Fighting Spirits and the E-Strikes, is that it turns our reds in our opponent's hand into block 3s, whereas, when we send Arcane at them, the reds are just block 1s. Of course, on the flip side, the Arcane spells are usually less damage, so there is a bit of a trade-off there. But especially with our opponent only having like an AB2 piece of equipment, I much prefer sending the Arcane right now. It's more awkward for them. Okay, then we draw into 3 reds, and here is where the power cards are. We were getting a lot of turns earlier where we were just getting like a whole bunch of 4 blues. And then now we draw into like 3 reds, so that's, it's definitely a little unfortunate. So I look at this, and I think it's unlikely that I'll be able to play this Ice Bolt this turn. So I'm looking to do my best 2-card hand, which is just send Fighting Spirit. In which case the Hail and Ice Vein will be blocked with. Cool, so we are just getting like gunned down by this dash right now. And this is what I mean. We are getting to like close to second cycle, if not, yeah, not quite at second cycle, but we're getting very close to it. And to the point where Dash's deck is kind of just full of blues. In which case, this item thing they have going on is just, it's really good. And they also have enough resources to like block us out. So we're in a very rough spot. But then our opponent does a zipper hit here. They load up the pistol and then they fire off zipper hit. I guess they made the read that I'm really trying to keep these 2 cards in my hand. And so they decide to try and punish me by playing out the zipper hit. But then I realized that I can punish them by just playing my Ice Bolt. Because if I play this Ice Bolt, it gives them a Frostbite, which stops their pistol hit, which basically means I'm blocking like 5 damage this turn by just playing out my Ice Bolt. In which case, I'm forced to arsenal this red, but it's, it's not the worst. I still have an arsenal at least, but, I am blocking like 5 damage. So at first, I decide I want to block with this Ironhides and use the 1 float after playing the Ice Bolt to like just get value of my full blue pitch. But I decide it's just better for me to be aggressive and just use my Tunic to Waning Moon for 3. Yep, so I just come into taking 4 here. So opponent getting greedy there with the zipper hit really paid off for us. Although it's hard to tell. Like, I mean, sometimes, like in that sort of situation, they do sort of want to like punish me for trying to keep too many cards. But at the same time, they can get blown out like what we see here. Yeah, and then they try to activate a pistol and they forget that they have a frostbite. Yeah. The unfortunate thing is that we're just arsenaling this and then we're giving them like a full grip when they have all these pistols out, so it's not looking good for it. And we finally find that last Channel Lake Frigid, but it is too late. Because this turn, what I want to do is just send the Fighting Spirit, and if I can arsenal this Aether Hail, if I can somehow survive with just blocking with 2 cards, one of them being the Channel Lake Frigid because it's a block 3, if I can somehow do that and send this Fighting Spirit and an Arsenal Aether Hail, I feel like I'm in a very good spot. There is still, like, if I have to, I'd be blocking all my 3 blocks and just sending Fighting Spirit on my turn, giving up my Arsenal, but I am sending 7 at my opponent while still having Striders up, so there is a chance I can do something with that. But that's a worst case, and I really hope we don't need to get there. So I seem to decide to block with the Aether Hail, which I think, yeah, no, that's definitely a mistake. Yeah, I think I saw Channeling Fissure and I thought, oh, this is my way back in, but I think that's definitely wrong. I think my way back in is to, well, kill my opponent. Channeling Fissure would be way too slow. So, disagreed my blocking decision there. Although it seems like there's a very good chance that I'm going to need to block with the Channeling Frigid anyway. So, yeah. So, ends up not being, not making a difference, even if I blocked the channel first. But I think that was the correct play. Just in case in some weird world, if we actually managed to keep an extra card, it should have been the Aether Hail instead of the channel. Cool. We go down to 2, we send Fighting Spirit, gain a life, and send 7. And obviously our best bet is if opponent takes this. And then we draw an Arcane Spell to Striders them, but they should try and block. They should try and block 6 in this. And then just keep doing the pistol things to end the game. Okay, so they only block 4. They take 3, go to 6. So we actually, like, we still theoretically have lethal here. But let's see. The nice thing about these items is that, the opponent does need to spend quite a bit to, like, load them all up and stuff. And, the loading them up happens, like, before they actually deal any damage, so that's quite nice. So we have lethal here in a sense. Actually, I mean, Hail plus Moon is lethal by itself, and if the Frostbite can stick, that's an extra 2 damage, so that's kind of what I'm hoping for here. Okay, and the opponent sends this pistol without activating the Purifiers, and I was very confused by this. I actually asked them in the chat. I was like, "Did you mean to activate them? We can undo if you mistakenly forgot to activate them." But my opponent confirmed that no, that was intentional. So I was very confused. So then I was just like, I'm just gonna take the 2, just to see what else they have. Because like once, we're at the stage where it's like I just need them to commit a bit more, and once they've committed just a bit too much, I can blast them with 7 with Hail plus Moon. So I'm okay going down to 1. I just need to be alive. And the moment they show me what their last card is, or like how many resources they have floating, then I can do things. Although, if they did activate this Purifiers, then I would just block with the CNC. So in the end, it wouldn't have made that much of a difference, because, yeah, so over here, they pitch and they show me that they only have 1 resource remaining, and I'm like, okay, I have lethal. Because with 1 resource, they actually can't block anything, because they only have AB2. So they are just dead here. So, even if they pumped this pistol to +5 on the first hit, I would have blocked with the CNC, and I still have enough to do the Aether Hail play that I'm trying to do. So, yeah. I just block with a Gauntlet because I'll have extra resources with Striders plus Hail. Plus Waning Moon, so, might as well be efficient all the way until the last turn. Cool. So at this point, I really should have already used my Striders. Yeah. Since I know I have lethal. Oh, I guess Oasis Respite is potentially a card that that I lose to. So fine, yeah. My opponent uses the last resource, and then I just go ahead and do the Striders Waning Moon. Yeah. Probably unnecessary to wait this long. It's unlikely my opponent runs Respites, since we've already seen like 2/3 of the deck. But yeah. And actually, yeah, we don't even need to Waning Moon because the Frostbite will just kill them. So, yeah, that was the game. And we get there just barely. Very tough matchup, Dash, honestly. Like I said at the start, they're kind of like Guardian in the sense that they have enough blues and the AB to block you out. At the same time, they're way more aggressive than Guardians can be. They're just way more flexible with like their hands. Like 4, 3, 2, 1 card hands. It's like they can always do something with it. I can always do something to maximize it, which Guardian doesn't quite have. So yeah, very scary opponent, and yeah, it's a tough one. But yeah, thank you for watching and hope you enjoyed it.